Hi everybody, it's Ed back with another tutorial on Manga Studio. This time I'm going to talk about importing art either from a scan from something you've drawn and scanned into your computer or from something you've drawn digitally in another program like Sketchbook Pro into Manga Studio. Now there's two reasons that I do this and two ways that I do this, and I'll explain how I do each of them just so that you kind of know the different options that are available to you. Now, the standard way that I do this, and I would say the way that I've done this up until recently, is that no matter what, if I drew something somewhere else, I was always inking it and coloring it in Manga Studio after the fact. That was the way I operated. What I would do is I would scan in my art. So I usually draw a very basic thumbnail or a sketch to get the proportions and the scene right. And then I scan it into my computer, and then I bring it into Manga Studio as a new layer, lower the opacity, and ink over top of it on another layer. So I'll show you that real quick, how I do that. So go to Import, Image, select my scan. I have it here as a JPEG. You might have it as a PNG or a TIFF file, depending on how you scan things into your computer. And it comes in as a new layer. You have this adjustment, so you can bring it down, get it to, about the size that you want. And then depending on what type of file it is, you can put it underneath your line work layer, and you can change the color of the file, make it a blue rather than black. Makes it easier to see your inks relative to your roughs. And then you can take the opacity down quite a bit. Then you can go to your line work layer, grab a pen. I'll take the textured pen here. What do we got? That's a pretty good size. And then I'll zoom in and start inking over top of it. So this is what I would usually do. I would say like 90% of the things that I've done where I didn't draw it in Manga Studio first, I did this way. Come in, start drawing your inks. You essentially have to redraw what you've drawn. And that's fine. Like I said, I usually know I'm going to do this, so I don't usually create really tight pencils or a tight image to scan in ahead of time. But occasionally I just go a little nuts with my pen and I do some really tight line work. Like this is tighter than most of the line work that I would import to use as a rough. So what happens when you create a really cool image and you want to bring it in and you really just want to color it in Manga Studio and maybe do a couple other enhancements to it, and you don't want to do that? Well, you can see that when I scan this in, it still has this white background on it. So we don't want that. We would want it to be just like a line work layer right when it comes into the program. So let's delete this, and I'll show you what I mean. Let's delete that, get this to back where it was. So like I said, I have this tight image and I want to bring it in here. What should I do? Well, I actually have to use another program to do this, and I don't know if there's a way to do it in Manga Studio. I haven't figured it out yet. This way works pretty well, and it's free. So what you first need to do is you need to download a program called Inkscape. You can go to inkscape.org and download it for whatever version of operating system you have on your computer. And for those of you who aren't familiar, Inkscape is basically a freeware version of Adobe Illustrator. They're a little different. I'm sure people who really know it well would correct me for saying that, but for our purposes, they're pretty much equivalent. Okay. So you have to download it. Then you open it, go to File, Import, find your scan, and open it into Inkscape. Now, I didn't mention this before, but when I scan stuff into my computer, I scan it as a black and white file. Sometimes you have the option of importing it as a photo. I wouldn't do that because a lot of times you'll get weird shadows on the paper if the paper has texture to it and stuff like that. So black and white will give you cleaner lines, and you can mess with the contrast and brightness to get your lines a lot cleaner. And I would recommend that. I think it saves you a lot more time if you do that up front when you're actually scanning it in. I'd show you with my actual settings, but everybody's scanners are different, so I don't know how useful that is to you. So just make sure you get a good quality scan when you bring it in to begin with. Okay, and like I said, I use a JPEG for this. I don't know if PNG or TIFF files would work the same way. I know a JPEG will in this case. So you're going to import it, select link. I think the default is embed. you'll have these two options here. I leave them the same. You can mess with them to see what they would do if they would change the image in different ways. You can click Don't Ask again if you like the settings and want it to always do this when you import your images. So just give the computer a second to import this. And then once it's imported, we're going to do something that's similar to what they call a live trace in Adobe Illustrator. Here it's called something different, but it's basically the same thing. It's called bitmap trace. So we've got the image imported here. Get our selector, move this guy over here. At this point, it still has a white background. We don't want that. So what we'll do is we'll go to Object. Sorry, I always want to go to Object. Go to Path, Trace Bitmap. You'll get this option screen that comes up. Lots of options here. I don't think live preview is checked by default. You might want to uncheck it if you don't have a lot of processing power in your computer, because I think it takes a lot to render it in this folder. What this is going to do is it's going to trace the image in vectors, and then it's going to fill it with whatever color you want. We're going to fill it with black. That's the default. And it'll create basically a new layer that is exactly what we want. So you have all these options here. Like I said, I kind of keep them the same. You can invert the image if you want to. That kind of shows you where some of your extra little dots are that maybe you don't want. I wouldn't import it that way, but you just want to get an idea of how it's looking. You can change all of these different options to see what they do, change how big the speckles have to be suppressed and things like that. So it's kind of cool. It gives you a lot of options. When you get them to the way that you want, click OK. And it'll run for a second. You'll see the stop button will come up. Oh, it's done. It already went back to here. And now you can see at the bottom it says path, 22,454 nodes in layer. Okay, so nodes are these things that are created in the vectors. And you see this little button up here. The nodes, you can do this in Manga Studio if you work with vectors. You can draw a line and then it has nodes on it that you can move to change the line. These little dots are the nodes. This thing has 22,000 of them. So if we click that button, we're going to see all those nodes. Looks crazy. If you're going to mess with the vectors in here, I would highly suggest that you change the settings in your import that we were just looking at that will allow you to do that. And actually, if we were to look at that thing again, you can see that if you mouse over a few of these things, like threshold, tolerance, you can change these settings to adjust those things. So if you change your tolerance, that will change how many nodes are in the file, which is probably a good thing if you want to actually mess with them. I don't know if you want. I don't want to sit there and adjust 22,000 nodes. Okay, so what this has done is it's space. See, I can move it, and you can see the original images under it. So what I do, and again, I don't know if this is that original image. I select this guy, and I don't know if it even actually matters where you put it on the canvas. You can then hit File, Export PNG Image. If you have an old version of Inkscape, I think it just says Export Bitmap. If it does that, then you just have to export as a bitmap and call it whatever .png. So select your path that you want to export it to. I want to put it on the desktop. You want your DPI set however you want it to be. My canvas is 300 DPI, so I have this set of my canvas in Manga Studio is 300 DPI, so I set this as 300 DPI. Export. It'll take a second. Now we're pretty much done with Inkscape. We can go back into Manga Studio, and we go to File, Import, and this time we're going to import this image. We see we have our old scan here, but now we have a path. It's a PNG image. And notice the difference. I'll import the other file just to show you the difference. If I import the scan as well. So here's the scan. The scan has a white background. If we hide that, we see our new path has no background. So what's cool about this is you can adjust it to where you want it to be, and then you can color under it. But before you do that, I would highly suggest a few things. First, I would actually go to Layer, Convert Layer, and change it to a raster layer that's monochrome, black and white. And that will actually, if you did actually scan it in as a photo, I could be wrong about this, but I don't think I am. It could come in as a bunch of different gray tones. So changing it to black and white will sort of make it pick what's black and what's white, and we'll make it blacker or whiter and give you tighter ink lines to work with. Okay, so you can see that it changed. It originally had a little picture like this. Now it's changed to this. That's how we know that it's been changed. And now I can go into this and I can actually clean it up a bit. A couple of those specks that were on there that were bothering me, I can now go in and erase. Grab my eraser, erase there, take those guys out. There's a little one up here too. Okay, otherwise looks pretty good. I can also do some things like, I can clean up his eyebrow. I could probably change this shadow. I don't like this shadow, and that's part of the reason that I wanted to import this in the first place, to clean it up. There's actually a little spot down here I can clean up. Then I'll just move my line work. I don't actually need the line work layer anymore. I can just delete that. This has become my line work layer. I might even rename it line work. And then I can come in here and I can throw in another, let's throw in another layer, move it under the line work, and we'll just call that layer colors. And I can start coloring on it. So let's grab a bread color, I guess. I'm actually really bad with colors. I think I might have some colorblind issues. That looks kind of brown. Grab the wand, select the bread, and make sure I'm on the colors layer, and I can fill it. Boom, look at that. And in very short order, you can actually get this whole thing looking like an actual cartoon, which is pretty cool. I think this is like a game changer for me. I'm sure people out there probably reading or listening to this or watching this are going, "Oh, I knew this already." But when I figured this out, it just like kind of blew my mind. So I hope it has done likewise for you, and that you don't have to spend too much time cleaning up your computer screen afterward because of that. Anyway, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. You can always check out my videos every week. I try to do one weekly on Mondays on my YouTube channel. You can also check out my cartoons. This one will be up this Wednesday on cantorwont.com, KANTORWONT.com. And I also sometimes put up some blog posts there about cartooning and just, anything related to drawing that I find interesting. So, hit me up over there, or you can send me a message on Twitter. My handle on Twitter is @Edomaniac. But until next time, keep making cool stuff, and please share it with me if you do make something cool from this.